Hey, hello, this is Jabr Ghanem, and I have a quick thought about not necessarily the gospel, but gospel related. So, people who've been watching this know I read from different translations of the Bible, different translations of the Old Testament. So, why do I do this? I think a big problem we have is we stick to the King James Version with its old, beautiful English, but because of the distance in time between us and the King James times, we've lost touch with that language, and it requires training to understand that language. So yesterday, I picked up a print copy of the contemporary English version of the Bible, which is one version that I, read from regularly. It's one of the many versions. I make sure that I read from as many translations of the Bible in English as possible because it always gives me a different sense for the verses. It gives me a different understanding, and I feel the Spirit in a different way when I read from different translations. But this morning, one reason I pick up the print copies of different Bible translations is because of the introduction, which usually has the notes of the translation committee, and they usually have some features that are cool to study with. So, and they start the CEV, the Contemporary English Version Committee, starts with a quote from the introduction to the King James Version written by the Translation Committee. And it's beautiful, it's poetic, and it's accessible, and it touched my experience as a translator very deeply. So here is what it says. Translation, it is that opens the window to let in the light that breaks the shell, that we may eat the kernel, that puts aside the curtain, that we may look into the most holy place, that removes the cover of the well, that we may come by the water. And so this is from the introduction of the King James Version, the 1611 edition. And really, this is what it is. And when they put down when they translated the Bible into the King James language, they actually strove to make the language accessible to the common English speaker at the time. They wanted someone in the market selling fish to understand what's being said. What they didn't know is that their language would become the Shakespearean, the elevated English language that we study in colleges today. So the challenge of the translators nowadays is to come up with a translation or translations that speak to the contemporary readers. And that is the spirit of the King James Version. As long as you stay accurate, you stay beautiful, you stay clear, you stay dignified, there is no problem with reading the Bible in modern English. And having the King James aside as a reference. But what I want to say is, if you're struggling with understanding the Old Testament, if you feel distanced from it, if you feel like you can't go through it, if you can't understand the difficult words of Isaiah or Hosea or Amos or Daniel or the prophecies of Daniel or Jeremiah, or understand Ecclesiastes, go and pick a translation that is in a modern English that you can understand. Pick the most difficult passage while you're standing there at the bookstore, a passage that you're struggling with, and read it in the different translation and see how you feel about it. The New International Version, known as the NIV, is probably a good place to start, but there are many others. And if anyone wants to know what I suggest for other versions of the Bible in contemporary English, just leave me a note and I'll put down a list. So that's my thought for today. It's just, if you're struggling, pick up a new translation, read from it, have the King James as a reference, but do not let the difficulty of the language obstruct you from reading the Old Testament, because it's a wonderful book. Thank you for listening.